In this video we are going to go over the basics of how to set up Cloth in Obi Cloth version 5. So the first thing I'm going to do here is go to Game Object, 3D Object, Obi Cloth. As you can see, it has created an Obi Cloth object and an Obi Solver object automatically to manage our cloth simulation. If we take a look at the cloth inspector here, you can see that the first property, the first slot in the list is accepts a blueprint as an input, okay, an Obi Cloth blueprint. Blueprints are assets that store the particle-based representation of an object, and you can reuse the same blueprint for multiple cloth objects. So what I'm going to do now is right-click in my project folder, create Obi Cloth blueprint. Now I'm going to give a name to my blueprint. I'll call it Cloth. And as you can see, cloth blueprints need an input mesh to generate the particle representation from. So I'm going to select the simple plane mesh and then click generate. Once you do this, the blueprint has already been generated and you can edit it. I'm going to click edit now. And since the blueprint editor takes place in a new scene, Unity will ask us if we want to save our currently open scene. I'm going to say yes. And now we are in the blueprint editor. As you can see here, we can see the individual particles that make up our cloth object. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select a couple particles in the corners. These two particles here, and I'm going to turn them into a particle group so that we can later hang the rectangular piece of cloth from these two corners here. With those two particles selected, I will click on this plus button here in the particle group list and then give them a name, corners, and that's it. That's all we need to do. So I will click done and we're back on our previous scene. Now I'm going to select our Obi Cloth object and simply drag the blueprint to the blueprint slot. As you can see, the blueprint mesh appears immediately, and if we hit play now, we would see it falling due to gravity. There's two things we can do now. One of them is to give the mesh a material so it doesn't look all pink, default material. And now I can add an attachment component that we will use to attach the particle group we defined earlier to the cloth transform. Attachments are very easy to work with. All they need as input is a target transform, which is the transform that the particles will be attached to, in this case its own transform. Then we have to select a particle group. We only have one that we defined earlier in the blueprint editor. And now you can select between two types of attachment, static or dynamic. Static attachments basically rigidly transform the particles. They force their positions to be relative to a given transform. And dynamic attachments work like the good old pin constraints. That is, if you want to hang a rigid body from a piece of cloth, for instance, and you want both the cloth and the rigid body to feel each other, you would have to use dynamic attachments, okay? Otherwise, if you use the static attachment, in that case, the rigid body will fall due to gravity and take the cloth with it, because the cloth will not be aware that something is pulling from it, okay? In this case, we have no rigid bodies, so a static attachment is enough. If I click play now, you would see the cloth falling and be attached to the two corners we defined. We can, of course, turn on and off the attachment at runtime, and we can change the particle group at runtime and also the type. Okay, so that's all for this video. See you in the next one.